My mom slapped me for asking about my own donation. 3 days later, her pastor called me demanding $10,000. So I took her down, with one legal letter. Hello, I'm Lena, and last Easter Sunday, my mother smacked me across the face in front of our entire extended family for refusing to write another check to her church. However, that wasn't the worst part. 3 days later, Pastor Reed called me personally, not to inquire about my well-being, but to inquire about when I would be reinstating my $15,000 annual contribution to the building fund. That's when I realized my mother had been using my money to establish herself as the most generous family at Grace Community Church for the previous 6 years. I never expected that sticking up for myself would lead to the discovery of a web of falsehoods that stretched over my entire life. However, the folks who raised you to be good are often the ones who take advantage of your goodness. As I drove into my parents' home on Easter Sunday morning in Riverside, Ohio, the March air still had the bite of winter. Mom has been messaging since 7 a.m. about arriving early to assist with the ham, but I suspected it was more about making sure I looked nice before the rest of the family came. My Honda Civic appeared humble next to Dad's newly washed Silverado and Clara's dazzling Audi SUV, which were already parked in the circular drive. I pulled the store-bought dinner rolls from my passenger seat, fully expecting Mom to say something about how she had been up since dawn, cooking everything from scratch. The front door was unlocked, as is customary on family gathering days, and the aroma of brown sugar and cloves hit me the instant I went inside. Classical music wafted from the kitchen, accompanied by the sound of pots clattering and Mom's voice directing traffic. The Mitchell family home on Maple Street had not changed much since I was a child. The same beige walls are lined with family photos in similar gold frames. The same burgundy carpet that revealed every trace of lint. The same formal living room that no one was allowed to live in. Clara's laughter could be heard from the kitchen. She was undoubtedly already Mom's favorite helper, while I was invariably tasked with setting the table or folding napkins. Mom emerged in the hallway wearing her best Easter dress, a navy blue outfit with pearl buttons that she had purchased specifically for church this morning. Her hair was groomed in exquisite waves, and her makeup looked professional. She drew me into a hug that felt more like a performance than love, the kind where she could whisper instructions without anybody else listening. Lena, honey, you look tired. Did you remember to bring the offering envelope I gave you last week? She whispered into my ear. Pastor Reed mentioned the building fund is still short for this quarter. I drew back, little perplexed. Mom, I already set up the automatic transfer for this year. The first payment went through last month. I had certainly planned for my yearly $15,000 donation to be divided into quarterly payments, something I had begun doing 3 years ago to better manage my nonprofit salary. Her smile tightened almost subtly. Well, yes, but there are always additional opportunities to give. The church is doing such important work, and our family has always been known for its generosity. She took my elbow and led me to the kitchen. Come say hello to everyone. Clara brought the most beautiful flowers. The kitchen was filled with typical pandemonium. Dad stood near the coffee pot in his Sunday khakis and button-down shirt, his hair still showing comb marks from this morning's church service. Clara arranged white lilies in a crystal vase, her movements precise and beautiful. She looked up as we arrived, her grin warm but calculated. Lena, perfect timing. I was just telling Mom about Eric's promotion. He's going to be managing the entire Northeast region now. Clara's husband Eric emerged from the pantry holding a bottle of wine. His fine watch caught the light as he extended his hand for the customary polite handshake. Congratulations, I responded, actually meaning it, despite the simmering competition between Clara and me. That's really exciting. Thanks. We're actually looking at houses in the Riverside Heights area now. You know, something with more space for when we start a family. Clara's hand rested on her flat stomach in a seemingly rehearsed position. Of course, we want to stay close to the church. Community is so important. This announcement made Mom happy. Isn't that wonderful? Clara and Eric understand the value of putting down roots, being part of something bigger than themselves. The suggestion lingered in the air like the aroma of ham. I lived downtown in a leased loft, went to church occasionally, and at 28, showed no signs of settling down with the type of man Mom might brag about at church social gatherings. I kept myself busy organizing the dinner rolls in a basket, attempting to avoid the usual sting of being found lacking. I didn't disagree with the value of community, but Grace Community Church had always seemed more like a social climbing opportunity than a spiritual home. The church was wealthy, primarily white, and appeared to prioritize charity giving as a status symbol over practical work. Lena's been so generous to the church too, Mom began abruptly, her voice carrying that special tone she used when she wanted everyone to pay attention. Haven't you, honey? Pastor Reed was just telling me how much he appreciates your family's commitment to the building fund. Something in her phrase made me pause. Your family's obligation, not yours. I looked at her, but she had already moved on, inspecting the ham in the oven with theatrical care. Uncle Henry came 20 minutes later, accompanied by his wife and my cousin Nora, plus 2 additional carloads of family I had only seen on vacations and funerals. The house was filled with the happy noise that comes from people who love each other, but don't always like each other very much. Everyone assembled in the dining room, where Mom had set the table with her wedding china and excellent silver that needed to be hand-washed. His words were, "Grace, thanking God for family, for blessings, and for the opportunity to give back to the community that had given us so much." The amens resonated around the table, and the subject turned to pot roast and glazed carrots. Uncle Henry discussed how his landscaping business was picking up for the spring. Nora presented updates about her nursing program. Eric dominated much of the talk, telling stories about his new job and their house-searching travels. I found myself largely listening, contributing when specifically requested, but feeling strangely removed from the entire event. There was a performative quality to it all, as if we were all playing roles we had been assigned long before. Clara was the successful daughter who had the ideal marriage. I was the artistic one who had yet to figure out her life. Mom and Dad were the community's pillars of generosity and respect. "Lena, Nora was asking about your job at the nonprofit," Mom added, bringing me back into the discussion. "Tell her about the work you're doing with homeless families." I smiled at Nora, delighted to be discussing something I was genuinely interested in. "We're working on a new program to help families transition from temporary housing into permanent situations. It's challenging, but really rewarding when you see someone get back on their feet." "That's so admirable," Nora replied. "It must be hard though, seeing all that need up close." "It is, but it's also inspiring. People are so resilient when they're given real support, instead of just charity that makes the giver feel good." The remarks came out more pointed than I had intended, and I noticed Mom's stern glare across the table. "Well, charity is important too," Eric remarked. "I mean, without people willing to give generously, organizations like yours couldn't function." "Absolutely," I agreed. "I just think it's important that the giving actually helps people, instead of just making the donors feel better about themselves." An awkward quiet fell over the table. Uncle Henry cleared his throat and asked Dad about the upcoming busy season at the hardware store. The subject changed smoothly to business and weather forecasts, but I could see Mom's disdain emanating from her end of the table. Mom stopped me in the kitchen after dinner, as the men gathered in the living room to chat baseball and the women began clearing dishes. Clara was at the sink, methodically rinsing plates, but I could see she was paying attention. "Lena, I need to talk to you about something," Mom whispered quietly. "Pastor Reed mentioned that there might be some confusion about your donation this year." I placed down the serving platter that I had been drying. "What kind of confusion?" "Well, apparently the amount that came through was less than what the church was expecting based on previous years." Mom's voice had taken on that cautious, measured tone she used when she was going to ask for something she knew I didn't want to give. "Mom, I gave the same amount I give every year, $15,000, just split into quarterly payments instead of one lump sum." Clara looked away from the sink, her demeanor perfectly neutral. "Maybe there was a banking error or something." "I don't think so," I replied softly. "I can check my bank statements, but I'm pretty sure everything went through correctly." Mom sighed, full of maternal disappointment. "The thing is, honey, the church really needs that money for the new fellowship hall. Construction costs have gone up, and Pastor Reed is counting on our family's continued support." "Our family's support?" "Well, yes. The Mitchell family has always been known for our generosity. Your father and I have been giving to the church for 30 years, and when you started contributing, it really meant something to Pastor Reed. It showed that our values were being passed down." I felt something chilly settle into my gut. "Mom, are you saying that the church thinks Dad is the one making my donations?" The hush lasted too long. Clara had become very still at the sink, and Mom's face had assumed the smooth, blank expression she used when she was prepared to lie. "It's not about who gets the credit, Lena. It's about the family being seen as united in our commitment to the church. But I write the checks. My name is on the donation forms." "Yes, but you use our address, since you move around so much. And Pastor Reed knows you're our daughter, so naturally he associates it with our family's overall giving." The parts were beginning to fit together in a way that made me feel sick. "Mom, does Pastor Reed think that you and Dad are giving $25,000 a year instead of 10? Her cheeks reddened slightly. "I don't see why the specific breakdown matters. What matters is that Grace Community is receiving support from faithful families. It matters because it's my money. And if people think it's coming from you, then you're getting credit for my generosity." My voice grew louder, and I could see Clara casting worrisome glances toward the dining room, where the rest of the family was still gathering. Don't be so dramatic, Lena. No one's stealing anything from you. We're all part of the same family, working toward the same goals. Are we? Because it seems like you've been letting people think you're more generous than you actually are, using my donations to boost your reputation at church. Mom's expression tightened. That is completely unfair. Your father and I have been faithful members of Grace Community since before you were born. We raised you to understand the importance of giving back. If you're suddenly concerned about getting personal recognition for your donations, maybe you need to examine your motives. The accusation landed like a smack. Here I was, trying to figure out why my donations were being credited to my parents, while I was being accused of having selfish reasons. This isn't about recognition, I responded, my tone taut with repressed rage. This is about honesty. If Pastor Reed thinks our family is giving $25,000 a year and you're not correcting that impression, then you're lying. How dare you accuse me of lying? Mom's voice had become dangerously quiet. After everything we've done for you, all the values we've tried to instill, this is how you talk to your mother. Clara turned away from the sink, her hands still soaking. Maybe we should all just calm down. It's Easter, and family is more important than money. It's not about the money, I emphasized. It's about the principle. The principle? Mom's voice rose now. The principle is that you support your family and your church without keeping score. The principle is that you're grateful for the blessings you've received instead of acting like some kind of victim. I'm not acting like a victim. I'm asking for honesty about where my money is going and who's getting credit for it. Your money? Mom repeated the words as if they were unpleasant. Everything you have because your father and I raised you right, sent you to college, supported you when you decided to work for pennies at some nonprofit instead of getting a real job. And now you're worried about getting credit for your donations? The unfairness stole my breath away. I had paid my own way through college using scholarships and loans. I'd never asked them for money as an adult. I had been donating to their church for 6 years, expecting nothing in return, except that the money go where I wanted it to go. I'm not asking for credit, I explained, my voice cracking. I'm asking you to stop taking credit for something you didn't do. And that's when she struck me. The slap came so fast that I didn't see it coming. I was standing by the kitchen counter trying to convey my viewpoint, when suddenly my cheek burned and my head rang. The sound resonated around the kitchen, like a gunshot. Clara gave a gasp. The talk in the dining room came to a halt. I could hear chairs scrapping across the floor as people attempted to find out what had happened. I stood there, one hand raising involuntarily to touch my cheek, staring at my mother in utter shock. She hadn't touched me once in the previous 28 years. She was breathing quickly, her cheeks flushed with fury and possibly embarrassment. Don't you ever talk to me like that again, she demanded, her voice low and spiteful. Not in my house, not in front of my family, you ungrateful, selfish little girl. The words hung in the air between us, like poison. I could hear footsteps approaching from the dining room and voices inquiring if everything was all right. But all I could think of was the look in my mother's eyes. It wasn't all anger, it was colder, more calculated, as if she saw me as an impediment to be overcome rather than a daughter to be loved. I picked up my purse from the counter where I had left it earlier. My hands were remarkably steady, but I could feel a tremble beginning deep in my chest. I'm leaving, I explained quietly. Lena. Wait. Clara reached for my arm, but I drew back. I'm done. I proceeded through the dining room, where my entire extended family sat still in their chairs, forks halfway to their mouths, eyes wide with surprise and embarrassment. Uncle Henry attempted to stand, but I shook my head. Happy Easter, everyone, I remarked, my tone remarkably regular. Thank you for dinner. I let myself out of the front door and took careful steps to my car. I could hear voices behind me, yelling out my name, but I didn't turn around. I got into my Honda, started the motor, and drove away from Maple Street for what I thought would be the final time. It wasn't until I got 3 blocks away that I began crying. Not the dramatic wailing type of crying you see in movies, but the calm, constant tears that occur when you know something fundamental has changed in your life and there is no turning back. I drove to Layla's apartment complex and waited in the parking lot for 10 minutes, attempting to gather my thoughts enough to explain what had occurred. Layla Rodriguez had been my closest friend since college. She was the type of person who would drop everything to help you relocate or bring you soup when you were sick. She worked as a county social worker, so she recognized the value of family as well as the harm that families can cause. When she opened her door and saw my face, she asked no questions. She simply pulled me inside, prepared tea and waited for me to find the words. She hit me. I finally murmured, sitting on Layla's couch with a mug of chamomile to warm my hands. My mother actually slapped me because I questioned whether she was taking credit for my church donations. Layla's dark eyes burned with rage. She what? I recounted her the entire event, beginning with the unpleasant chat in the morning and ending with Mom's hand touching my cheek. Layla listened without interrupting, her expression darkening with every detail. Lena, that's not just about money or credit, that's about control. She's been using your generosity to boost her own status. And when you called her on it, she got violent. I keep thinking I must have said something wrong, or pushed too hard. No. Layla replied firmly. You asked reasonable questions about your own money. Her reaction tells you everything you need to know about her motives. That night, I stayed at Layla's, sleeping on her couch and attempting to figure out what had happened. My phone buzzed with texts from Clara, each of which said something like, Mom is really upset and you should apologize. Nothing from Mom herself. And nothing from Dad. Monday morning arrived dark and drizzling, which matched my attitude well. I went to work at the Riverside Family Services Center, and my position directing marketing for the homeless aid program felt like the most honest thing I'd ever done. I spent the day preparing grant proposals and updating the website, thankful for work that didn't require me to act like everything was all right. Pastor Reed called on Tuesday afternoon. I was going over spreadsheets for our upcoming fundraising drive when my desk phone called. The caller ID indicated Grace Community Church, and for a brief time, I pondered leaving the call on voicemail, but curiosity won out, and I answered on the fourth ring. Lena Mitchell speaking. Lena, this is Pastor William Reed from Grace Community. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. His speech had the practiced warmth that church leaders develop through years of pastoral care. But something below it caused me to sit up taller in my chair. Hello, Pastor Reed. What can I do for you? Well, I wanted to reach out personally about a rather delicate matter. It seems there may have been some confusion regarding your family's donation commitment for this year's building fund. I felt my stomach drop. After everything that had transpired on Easter, I didn't want to have this conversation with my family's pastor. What kind of confusion? Our records show that the Mitchell family pledged $25,000 for this year's building campaign, but we've only received $15,000 so far. I wanted to check if perhaps there was a delay with the remaining payment, or if there were any issues I should be aware of. The words struck me like freezing water. Pastor Reed, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I donated $15,000, which is my annual contribution. I've never pledged $25,000. There was a lengthy delay on the other end of the telephone. I see. Well, perhaps I should clarify. When your mother and I discussed the building fund back in January, she indicated that the Mitchell family would be increasing their total contribution this year. She mentioned that you had done very well financially and were eager to give more generously. My hand squeezed around the phone. My mother told you I wanted to give more money. She spoke very highly of your commitment to the church and your desire to follow in your parents' footsteps of generous giving. I believe her exact words were that you understood the importance of sacrificing for God's work. I closed my eyes and tried to digest what I was hearing. Not only had my mother taken credit for my donations, but she had also reportedly promised the church more money, without consulting me. Pastor Reed, I need to be very clear about something. I give $15,000 to Grace Community every year, and that's my personal decision, and my personal money. My parents contribute separately from their own funds. If my mother suggested that I would be giving more, she was mistaken. Another uneasy quiet. I appreciate your clarification, Lena. However, I do hope you'll understand that the church has made commitments based on the pledges we received. The construction company is depending on these funds, and we've already had to take out a loan to cover the shortfall. The guilt trip was so apparent it was almost offensive. I understand that funding is important, but I can only be responsible for what I actually pledged, which was $15,000. Of course. I wouldn't want to pressure you, but I do wonder if perhaps you might consider whether God is calling you to stretch your faith through increased giving. Your parents have always been such wonderful examples of sacrificial generosity. Again, my parents were held up as the benchmark, with the suggestion that I was falling short if I didn't meet their claimed degree of generosity. Except, I was beginning to suspect that their reputation for generosity was mostly due to my contributions. Pastor Reed, can I ask you something? When you think of the Mitchell family's total annual giving, what amount comes to mind? Well, I don't like to discuss specific numbers, but your family has consistently been among our most generous supporters. I believe the total has been around $25,000 to $30,000 annually. My parents gave $10,000. I gave $15,000. The math was straightforward, but Pastor Reed had been persuaded to assume it was all down to Mom and Dad's selfless gift, rather than understanding that more than half of it was my own contribution. I think there may have been some miscommunication about how our family's giving is structured, I added quietly. My donations are separate from my parents' donations. We're not giving as a single unit. I see. Pastor Reed seemed perplexed now. Your mother always presents the family contributions as a unified commitment. She's spoken so beautifully about how your father has worked hard to provide for the family, and how that enables everyone to give generously to God's work. The picture became clearer and more frustrating by the minute. Mom not only took credit for my money, but she also created a story in which Dad was the provider, allowing everyone else to be kind. Meanwhile, I was working full-time and donating from my own pay to a church where I was barely acknowledged as an individual. Pastor Reed, I need to clarify my position. Going forward, I'll be making my own donation decisions independently. If there were any commitments made on my behalf without my knowledge, I can't be held responsible for those. I understand your position, Lena, though I admit I'm somewhat surprised. Your mother spoke so passionately about the family's shared vision for supporting the church's growth. My mother doesn't speak for me when it comes to my financial decisions. The comments came out stronger than I had intended, and I could detect a shift in Pastor Reed's tone when he reacted. Of course not. I certainly didn't mean to overstep. However, I do hope you'll pray about whether you might find it in your heart to help us through this difficult situation. The building fund is so close to its goal, and every dollar makes a difference. I'll think about it, I responded, knowing full well what I was going to say. Thank you for calling, Pastor Reed. Thank you, Lena, and please give my regards to your parents. Your mother mentioned that Easter dinner was lovely. After hanging up, I sat staring at my computer screen without seeing anything. Easter dinner was amazing. Right up until Mom struck me for questioning her sincerity regarding these donations. The fact that she had spoken to Pastor Reed about Easter as if it had been a joyful family gathering felt like an extra layer of dishonesty. I opened my laptop and accessed my online banking. There it was, my automated quarterly donation of $3,750 to Grace Community Church, made through the March Fund. I took a screenshot of the transaction and then navigated back through past months. Every payment is always on time and in the exact amount. Then I had another thought. I opened a new browser tab and browsed to the Grace Community website. Most churches list their big benefactors in yearly reports or newsletter acknowledgments. I found what I was looking for in the previous year's stewardship report, a list of families who had contributed more than $10,000, organized by giving level. The Mitchell family were in the $25,000 category, not Thomas or Janet Mitchell, not Thomas, Janet, or Lena Mitchell, it's just the Mitchell family. As if we were some type of financial entity where individual contributions were irrelevant. I felt nauseous. For 6 years, I had consistently given money to a religion that did not even recognize me as a person. Every dollar I provided was absorbed into my parents' reputation, allowing them to be hailed as great philanthropists while I went unnoticed. I contacted Layla during my lunch break because I needed to discuss what I had discovered with someone who could help me think straight. That's financial fraud, she replied right after I detailed the phone call. Maybe not legally, since you did authorize the donations, but ethically, it's completely wrong. What's really bothering me is that Pastor Reed seemed genuinely surprised to learn that I make my own giving decisions, like it had never occurred to him that I might be a separate person with my own relationship to the church. Because your mother has spent years presenting you as an extension of their family unit, rather than an adult with your own autonomy. It's a classic control tactic. I keep wondering if I should have seen this coming. There were signs like how Mom always wanted to know when I'd made my donations, or how she'd mentioned my generosity to other church members. Lena, you trusted your mother to be honest about something as basic as where your money was going. That's not naive, that's normal. The fact that she violated that trust says everything about her character and nothing about your judgment. That afternoon I wrote an email to Pastor Reed. I kept it simple and professional, noting that I would continue to donate $15,000 annually as agreed, but that any additional commitments made on my behalf were not permitted and would not be honored. I also requested that future messages regarding my donations be sent to me directly rather than through my parents. I did not submit it immediately. Instead, I saved it as a draft and chose to sleep on it. But that evening my phone started ringing. First, there was Clara. Lena, Mom is really upset. She says you were rude to Pastor Reed and made the family look bad. I was honest with Pastor Reed about my own donations. If that made anyone look bad, maybe they should examine why. Can't you just apologize for the sake of family harmony? Apologize for what? For not giving money I didn't promise to give? You know what I mean. Mom's been crying all day. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost comical. Mom beats me, lies about my donations, is caught in her lying, and I'm supposed to apologize to make her feel better? Clara, did you know that the church thinks mom and dad give $25,000 a year instead of 10? I don't really pay attention to those details. Well, you should. Because if they're taking credit for money they didn't give, that affects the whole family's reputation. Why does it matter who gets credit? We're all family. That word came up again. We're all family, as if being connected somehow eliminated the requirement for fundamental honesty and respect. It matters because it's lying, Clara. It matters because I work hard for my money, and I should get to decide how it's acknowledged when I give it away. You're being really selfish about this. I hung up. 20 minutes later, Dad called. His approach was different, more conciliatory, but still aimed at convincing me to back down. Lena, honey, I think there's been a big misunderstanding here. Your mother never meant to take credit for anything you've done. Dad, Pastor Reed told me that Mom promised I would increase my donation this year without asking me first. How is that not taking credit for my money? She was just trying to show the pastor that our family is committed to the church. Sometimes she gets a little enthusiastic about these things. A little enthusiastic? She let the church believe you two were giving $25,000 a year when you're actually giving $10. There was a prolonged pause. How did you know how much we give? The question took me off guard. I didn't until I started putting the pieces together. Pastor Reed said the Mitchell family gives $25,000 to $30,000 annually. I give 15, so I figured. You figured we only give 10? Dad's voice had become cooler. I didn't figure anything judgmental about it, Dad. $10,000 is generous, but it's not $25,000. And letting people think it is becomes a problem when they start expecting more. Your mother has devoted her life to that church, Lena. She volunteers for every committee, organizes half the social events, and brings meals to every family in crisis. If the pastor wants to recognize our family's overall contribution to the community, that includes more than just money. He was correct about Mom's voluntary activities, but that was not the issue. I'm not questioning Mom's service to the church. I'm questioning why my financial contributions are being absorbed into your reputation instead of being acknowledged as my own choice. Because you are our daughter, and we have trained you to be generous and faithful. Because when you give to the church, it reflects the values we instilled in you. But I am not a child anymore, Dad. I'm 28 years old, and I have my own work and relationship with my faith. When I want to offer money, that is my decision. And we're proud of that decision. We have never said differently. So why does Pastor Reed believe you are the one making sacrifices to enable everyone else's generosity? Another lapse in stillness. I think you're reading too much into casual conversation, Lena. Am I? Because Pastor Reed highlighted how hard you work to care for your family, which allows everyone to give freely. That is not a casual conversation, Dad. That's a specific narrative about who is accountable for the money. Look, your mother is upset and puzzled by all of this. She hit you and feels bad about it. Can't we simply put this behind us and go on as a family? There was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of what had happened on Easter, wrapped in a request to forget about it and pretend everything was well. Daddy, she didn't simply smack me. She accused me of being ungrateful and selfish for asking honest questions regarding my own money. And now she's claiming that I was rude to Pastor Reed when all I did was explain that she cannot make financial obligations on my behalf. She is your mother, Lena. She loves you. Love doesn't give someone the right to lie about my money or hit me when I object. You are not flawless, you know. Maybe you should approach these conversations with a bit more humility. I hung up on him too. By Thursday, the pressure campaign was in full swing. I received texts from 3 different aunts. All variations on the theme of family is more important than money and your mother is heartbroken. Uncle Henry called to say he didn't know all the details but hoped I would consider the bigger picture. And my cousin Nora weighed in with a carefully worded message about forgiveness and moving forward. The fact that I had been physically assaulted for inquiring about my own donations did not seem to register as relevant information. What struck me the most was that no one asked for my side of the story, as if they all assumed I had done something wrong and needed to apologize. Friday afternoon I emailed Pastor Reed. That evening my phone called again. This time, it was Mom. Lena Elizabeth Mitchell, I cannot believe you would embarrass this family the way you have. There was no hello, no apologies for assaulting me, no indication that we would need to talk about what had happened, only immediate attack mode. Hi Mom. Don't you say hi to me, Mom. Pastor Reed called me today. Deeply concerned about your email. He claimed you were expecting special appreciation for your donations while refusing to honor the family's promises. That was not what I said at all. He claims you assured him you wouldn't be liable for any agreements made on your behalf. That's exactly what you said, because you promised him money without consulting me first. You told him I wanted to raise my donations, but I never said anything like that. Lena, I was attempting to aid the church. The building fund was running low, and I knew you cared about the community. Then you should have asked me instead of making promises with my money. It isn't simply your money. Everything you have is the result of your family's upbringing and the ideals we taught you. When you donate to the church, you represent all of us. I am expressing myself, Mom. I am an adult who makes my own decisions concerning my income. Your own income from a job working with homeless people instead of using the education we paid for to build a real career. There it was. The underlying reason of her rage wasn't church donations at all, but my failure to meet her expectations of what my life should be like. Mom, my job is real. It's a meaningful job that benefits others. It's a hobby job with no remuneration. If you'd married someone stable, like Clara did, or gone into business, as we suggested, you'd have the wherewithal to make a real impact instead of dabbling in charitable work. I am making a difference. And I have resources. I have enough money to donate $15,000 to your church each year, which appears to make me generous enough to improve your reputation, but not responsible enough to manage my own finances. How could you say we are using you for money? Everything we've done has been for your benefit. Are you claiming credit for my donations, including promising the church that I will give more without being asked? I have never taken credit for anything. I just informed Pastor Reed that the Mitchell family supported the church's mission. If you want to start keeping track of who gives what, you might think about how much your father and I have put into raising you. It's not about keeping score, Mom. This is about basic honesty. Honesty? Do you want to talk about honesty? How about being honest and honoring your parents rather than humiliating us in front of our pastor? I did not disgrace anyone. I clarified my own financial commitments. You made us look like liars. The revelation remained in the air between us. She'd basically admitted that they'd been misrepresenting their donating, but it was my fault for bringing it up. Mom, if clarifying the truth makes you look like liars, maybe the problem isn't what I said. Don't you dare lecture me about truth, you ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By making us appear horrible in church. I don't mean to make you appear awful. I'm attempting to ensure that my personal contributions are acknowledged. Honestly, your contributions wouldn't exist without everything we gave you. First, your education, your values, your opportunities. If you think you can just take credit for everything you've accomplished without acknowledging where it came from, you're more selfish than I thought. I've never denied that you raised me or that my values came from my upbringing. But giving money to charity is my choice, made with my income, from my bank account. That's not selfish, Mom. That's just factual. Facts. She spat the word as if it were profane. You want facts? Here's a fact. You're 28 years old, unmarried, working a job that barely pays your rent, and living alone in some apartment downtown like you're too good for family. You donate money to get attention and recognition because you don't have anything else in your life worth bragging about. The savagery stole my breath away. Not only the words, but their deliberate nature. She had recognized and weaponized every insecurity I'd ever confessed with her in a single paragraph. I donate money because I believe in the church's mission, not for attention. Then why do you care so much about getting credit? Why can't you just be happy that the money is helping people? Because when you take credit for my generosity, it becomes your generosity instead of mine. And when you promise additional money without asking me, you're spending my resources without my consent. Resources. She chuckled, but it wasn't funny. What resources? You make $35,000 a year working for a nonprofit. The only reason you can afford to give away $15,000 is because you don't have a family to support or a real life to maintain. My life is real, Mom. Is it? When's the last time you brought someone home for dinner? When's the last time you made any effort to find a husband or start a family? You give money to the church because it's easier than building actual relationships. I had to end this conversation before things got any worse. I'm not going to continue discussing my personal life or my donation decisions. I've been clear with Pastor Reed about my position, and that's final. Your position, like you're some kind of business executive instead of our daughter, who's forgotten where she came from. I haven't forgotten anything, Mom. I just refuse to be treated like a child when it comes to my own money. Then stop acting like a child. Stop being so selfish and stubborn. Apologize to Pastor Reed. Commit to the building fund contribution you should have made in the first place. And remember that family loyalty means something. And if I don't? The silence was lengthy enough that I assumed she had hung up. Then you'll have to live with the consequences of your choices. The warning was vague but obvious. I was given an ultimatum. Comply with their requests or risk punishment. I can live with the consequences of being honest about my own donations, Mom. We'll see about that. She hung up. I sat on my couch, staring at the phone in my fingers, trying to figure out what had just happened. In 1 week, I went from being a devoted daughter who willingly donated to her family's church, to an ungrateful, selfish and difficult child who deserved to be punished for expressing fundamental financial autonomy. But something changed in me during that talk. Mom's brutal precision in her personal attacks indicated something significant. This was not truly about church donations at all. This was about maintaining control by putting me in a dependent, childish role in which my decisions and achievements could be incorporated into the family narrative without regard for my unique identity. I opened my laptop and started writing an email to Grace Community Church's administrative office. If they wished to regard the Mitchell family as a single financial unit, they were about to find out what happened when a member of that unit decided to resign from participation. The next morning, I would contact the church's finance secretary and ask that my name be removed from any family-based contributor recognition. My future donations, if any, will be made independently and acknowledged individually, or not at all. But first, I needed to figure out how much effect my money had on my parents at Grace Community Church. I spent Saturday morning at the Riverside Public Library, using their computers to look into Grace Community Church's financial records and public filings. What I discovered made my stomach turn unexpectedly. The prior year's annual report from the church included more than just a list of donations. It included thorough breakdowns of committee leadership, volunteer appreciation, and special awards for noteworthy efforts. The Mitchell family received recognition for more than simply their $25,000 contribution. Mom was named chair of the Ladies' Auxiliary, co-chair of the annual charity auction, and received the Faithful Servant Award for outstanding community service. Dad's name appeared on the Finance Committee and the Building Fund Oversight Board, both of which had a substantial impact on how the church's money was spent and which projects received priority funding. I compared their volunteer involvement to the timing of my donations. Mom had been elected chair of the Ladies' Auxiliary exactly 6 months after I made my first substantial contribution to the church. Dad joined the Finance Committee the next year. Every elevation in their church leadership appeared to coincide with my continuous giving pattern. The most damaging evidence, however, came from the Building Fund Committee's meeting minutes, which were public record, because the church was pursuing city construction licenses. The December meeting notes included a direct quotation from Dad. The Mitchell family stands ready to lead by example in this campaign. We believe in putting our money where our faith is. Our money, we have faith. He was practically speaking for me in formal church business, pledging resources that I had never consented to provide. I printed everything out and drove to Layla's flat. When I arrived, she was still in her jammies and appeared much more calm than I was. "You look like you haven't slept," she added, pouring coffee for me without asking. "I've been doing research." I put the printouts across the kitchen table. "Look at this." Layla reviewed the documents while I recounted what I had discovered. Her expression darkened as she read the meeting minutes and donor acknowledgments. "Lena, this is worse than I thought. They're not just taking credit for your money, they're using your donations to buy influence, and then wielding that influence to make commitments on your behalf." That's what I was thinking. Dad's on the committee that approved the building fund budget, which means he had input into how much money they planned to raise. And then he stood up in meetings promising that our family would contribute more. It's a conflict of interest at minimum. He's using inside information about church finances to make promises with money that isn't his, and he's doing it from a position of authority that he obtained partly through your donations. I slumped onto Layla's kitchen chair, overwhelmed by what I had discovered. "I thought this was just about them taking credit for my generosity, but they've been using my money to build a power base at church. And now that you're pushing back, they're afraid of losing that power. That's why your mom is so angry. It's not really about the church or your faith, it's about their status in the community." Layla poured my coffee and sat across from me. "What do you want to do about this?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to expose everything, show the church exactly how the Mitchell family's generous reputation was built. But part of me just wants to walk away and never think about any of these people again. Those aren't mutually exclusive options. You can expose the truth and then walk away. But if I do that, I'm not just hurting my parents. There are other people at church who genuinely care about the community and the building project. If my revelations cause a scandal, it could hurt programs that actually help people. Lena, you're not responsible for cleaning up other people's messes. Your parents created this situation by lying and manipulating. If there are consequences for the church, that's on them, not you." She was correct, but it still seemed overwhelming. I never wanted to be the one who pulled down institutions or caused community strife. I only wanted my contributions to be appreciated, honestly. Clara texted me. Mom wants to know if you're planning to come to church tomorrow. People are asking questions. I showed Layla the message, and she rolled her eyes. People are asking questions because your mother probably told them some version of events that makes you look like the problem. I can't face going to church right now. The thought of sitting there while Pastor Reed gives a sermon about forgiveness and family values, knowing what I know about how the finances really work, it makes me sick. Then don't go. You don't owe anyone your presence at church, especially not when they're treating you this badly. I spent the rest of the weekend at Layla's house, helping her arrange her wardrobe and trying not to worry about what was going on at Grace Community Church that Sunday morning. But Monday brought a new level of strain that I was unprepared for. Carol Jensen, the church secretary, phoned me at work. Her tone was carefully neutral, as is customary for church workers when giving uncomfortable leadership messages. Lena, Pastor Reed asked me to reach out about your donation status for this quarter. Our records show some confusion about whether you'll be fulfilling the commitment that was made on behalf of your family. Carol, I sent Pastor Reed an email explaining that I didn't make any additional commitments beyond my regular annual donation. Yes, he mentioned that, but he's concerned about the discrepancy between what was pledged and what we've received. The building fund is depending on those commitments. I understand that funding is important, but I can only be responsible for commitments I actually made. Of course. But Lena, I hope you'll consider that your family has always been such strong supporters of the church. Your parents' leadership has been invaluable to our community. There it was again, mild pressure veiled in recognition of my parents' donations, as if their volunteer work required me to provide money I hadn't pledged to give. I appreciate everything my parents do for the church, Carol, but my financial decisions are separate from theirs. I understand. Pastor Reed just asked me to make sure you knew how much the church values the Mitchell family's partnership. He's hoping we can find a way to work through this misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding on my end. I've been very clear about my donation intentions. Of course. Well, if you change your mind or want to discuss options for supporting the building fund, please let me know. After I hung up, I knew the church's pressure campaign had only just begun. They were not going to take my situation gently. They planned to keep pushing, using my parents' reputation and their own authority to attempt to wear me down. That afternoon I called Nathan Cole, a lawyer Layla had recommended who specializes in nonprofit and family law. His office was downtown, in one of those renovated historic buildings that attempted to strike a compromise between professional legitimacy and approachable appeal. Nathan was probably in his early 40s, with graying hair and a placid manner that suggested he'd witnessed every conceivable type of family financial stress. I described the incident as he took notes on a legal pad. So your parents have been misrepresenting your donations as part of their own giving. They used that false reputation to gain leadership positions at the church, and now they're using those positions to make financial commitments on your behalf. He summarized. That's the core of it, yes. And when you attempted to clarify the situation, your mother physically assaulted you. Hearing it so clearly made it sound even worse than it felt at the time. She slapped me. Yes. Lena. What you're describing could potentially be fraud depending on how the church's donation records are maintained and whether your parents received any direct benefits from their false reputation. What kind of benefits? Leadership positions that come with decision-making authority, social status that could benefit them professionally or personally, access to church resources or facilities. If they gain tangible advantages by lying about their giving levels, that could cross legal lines. I had not considered the professional viewpoint. Dad's hardware store conducted a lot of business with church members, and Mom's volunteer leadership most likely created doors in the community that helped them financially. What would you recommend? First, document everything, every conversation, every email, every piece of evidence about how your donations were misrepresented. Second, formally withdraw any authorization for your parents to speak on your behalf regarding financial matters. Third, consider whether you want to notify the church leadership about the misrepresentation. Would that create legal problems for my parents? Possibly. If the church has been making financial decisions based on false information, they could have grounds for action against whoever provided that false information. But Lena, that's not your responsibility to prevent. Your parents created this situation. Nathan led me through the process of documenting financial abuse, which is apparently more widespread in familial situations than I had previously understood. He provided me with paperwork for tracking communications, and a template for formally notifying institutions that my parents were not permitted to make commitments on my behalf. One more thing, he added as I prepared to depart. If this escalates, if they start threatening your employment, or trying to damage your reputation in the community, document that too. Retaliation often reveals the true motives behind the original deception. I drove home feeling better prepared to face the problem, but also more aware of how serious it had gotten. This was no longer just a financial disagreement among family members. It was possibly a legal issue with serious ramifications for everyone concerned. That evening, I sent formal letters to Grace Community Church and my parents. The letter to the church requested that my gift records be kept separate from any family accounts and that I be informed directly regarding all aspects of my donations. The letter to my parents stated that they were no longer authorized to make financial commitments on my behalf and that I would hold them accountable for any debts imposed in my name. I did not send either letter promptly. Instead, I addressed my Uncle Henry, my father's brother, who had always appeared to be the most rational member of the extended family. Lena, I'm glad you called. I've been worried about you since Easter. Uncle Henry, I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me. Of course. How much do you think Mom and Dad give to Grace Community Church every year? There was a pause. I don't really know the specifics, honey. Why? Because I've been giving $15,000 annually, and I just found out that the church thinks it's all coming from Mom and Dad. They've been taking credit for my donations and using that false reputation to gain leadership positions. Are you sure about that? Your parents have always been generous people. I'm sure about my own donations, Uncle Henry. I have bank records, and I'm sure about what Pastor Reed told me regarding the family's total giving. Another pause. That does sound problematic if they've been misrepresenting things. It gets worse. Mom promised the church I would increase my donation this year without asking me. When I questioned her about it, she slapped me. She what? She hit me, Uncle Henry, in front of the whole family. Jesus, Lena. I didn't know it had gotten physical. So everyone knows there was some kind of conflict, but nobody knows the details. Your mother told us there had been a misunderstanding about church donations, and that you'd gotten upset and left. She made it sound like you'd overreacted to something minor. She's been spinning the story to make me look like the problem. It sounds like there's a lot more going on than I understood. Lena, what do you need from me? The question took me off guard. After a week of family members urging me to apologize and give in, having someone ask what I needed seemed revolutionary. I need people to know the truth. I need them to understand that I didn't overreact or create drama over nothing. I was defending myself against lies and manipulation. I believe you, and I'll make sure other people know there's more to the story than what your mother has been saying. Thank you. That means more than you know. Lena, can I ask you something? What do you want to happen now? Do you want to repair things with your parents, or are you done with them? I had been avoiding the question, but Uncle Henry's forthright approach compelled me to face it. I don't know if repair is possible, Uncle Henry. This isn't just about money or church donations, it's about them treating me like a child whose decisions don't matter, taking credit for my choices and then getting violent when I object. I can't pretend that's okay. I understand. And for what it's worth, I think you're handling this with more grace than I would under the circumstances. After we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in days. Having one family member admit that my stance was logical helped me feel less solitary and weird, but my relief was fleeting. The next morning I received a call that altered everything. Lena, this is Dr. Patricia Kaplan from Riverside Family Services. I'm calling because we've received some concerning information about your employment here. My blood ran cold. Dr. Kaplan was the executive director of the organization where I worked, a lady I admired greatly and whose opinion was important to my career. What kind of concerning information? I received a call yesterday from someone claiming to be a board member at Grace Community Church. They expressed concerns about your professionalism and suggested that you might not be a good fit for an organization that works closely with faith-based community partners. The room began spinning. Dr. Kaplan, I think there may be some misunderstanding. I've been having a personal dispute with my family about church donations, but it has nothing to do with my work performance. That's what I suspected. The caller couldn't provide specific examples of unprofessional behavior, and your work here has been exemplary. But Lena, I need you to know that someone is actively trying to damage your professional reputation. Did they give a name? They said they were calling on behalf of the church leadership, but they wouldn't identify themselves specifically. However, they seem to have detailed knowledge of your family situation. My parents had upped their attacks on my career. They were so desperate to get me back in compliance that they were willing to destroy my livelihood. Dr. Kaplan, I want to be completely transparent with you about what's been happening. I told her the entire tale, beginning with the Easter dinner confrontation and ending with my discovery of the financial fraud and the church pressure campaign. She listened without interrupting and occasionally asked clarifying questions. Lena, I appreciate your honesty. Based on what you've told me, it sounds like you're being subjected to financial abuse and retaliation for standing up for yourself. That's completely unacceptable. I'm so sorry this has spilled over into my work life. I never wanted my personal problems to affect the organization. You're not the one who made it affect your work. Someone else chose to attack your professional reputation as a way of pressuring you personally. That tells me everything I need to know about their motives and character. What should I do? First, document this call and any other attempts to interfere with your employment. Second, consider whether you want to pursue legal action against whoever made that call. False statements intended to damage someone's professional reputation can constitute defamation. And my job? Your job is secure, Lena. Your work speaks for itself, and I'm not going to let someone's personal vendetta affect our staffing decisions. But I do want you to let me know immediately if you receive any more calls or contacts related to this situation. After hanging up, I sat at my computer, attempting to figure out what had just transpired. My parents did not just lie about my donations or slap me when I disagreed. They also attempted to harm my job because I refused to comply with their demands. The treachery was so complete and deliberate that it finally clarified something I'd been confused about all week. This was not a family dispute that could be settled by communication or compromise. This was war, and my parents had made it clear the moment they chose to attack my livelihood. I opened my laptop and emailed both letters I'd written the night before to Grace Community Church, officially removing my donations from my parents' accounts. The one to my parents, alerting them that they no longer had permission to speak on my behalf in any way. Then I contacted Nathan Cole to schedule an emergency appointment. If my parents wanted to escalate this argument to the point of destroying my career, they were about to discover that I too could escalate. But first, I had another call to make. Layla responded on the first ring. They tried to get me fired, I stated without hesitation. What? Someone from Grace Community Church called my boss and tried to convince her I was unprofessional and shouldn't work for an organization that partners with faith-based groups. Lena, that's illegal. That's defamation and interference with employment. I know. I'm meeting with the lawyer this afternoon. Good. Are you okay? Actually, I think I am. For the first time since this whole thing started, I'm not confused about what I should do. They just made it very clear that they see me as an enemy to be destroyed, rather than a daughter to be loved. What does that mean for you? It means I'm done trying to preserve relationships with people who are willing to attack my career to get their way. It means I'm going to fight back with everything I have. I'm proud of you. Don't be proud yet. Wait until you see what I do next. Nathan Cole relaxed back in his leather chair as I completed outlining the attempt to undermine my employment. His attitude had changed from professional concern to something resembling fury. Lena, what you're describing crosses several legal lines: defamation, intentional interference with employment, possibly conspiracy if multiple people were involved in coordinating these attacks. He took out a fresh legal paper and started writing. We need to move quickly to protect you and document everything. What kind of protection? First, we're going to send cease and desist letters to your parents and to Grace Community Church, demanding that they stop making any statements about you to third parties. Second, we're going to formally request that the church provide records of who authorized that call to your employer. Can they refuse? They can try, but if we have to file suit to get the information, a judge will order them to produce it. Churches aren't exempt from accountability when they engage in defamatory conduct. Nathan led me through the steps of preparing a legal case. It would necessitate meticulous documentation of every conversation, financial record, and occasion in which my parents or the church falsified information about me. The idea of turning my family turmoil into a legal concern seemed absurd, but the alternative was to let them continue to damage my reputation and livelihood. There's something else we should think about, Nathan added. If your parents have been using your donation history to gain influence at the church, and if they've been making financial commitments based on that false influence, the church itself might have claims against them. What do you mean? Think about it. If the church budgeted for a $25,000 donation from your family based on your parents' representations, and they can only actually collect $15,000, the church has been financially harmed by your parents' deception. I hadn't considered the possibility that my parents may face sanctions from the church itself. Grace Community Church was a major institution in Riverside, with wealthy members and considerable political clout. If they learned they had been duped, they would have resources to seek accountability that I could never equal as an individual. Would that help my case? It could. If the church pursues action against your parents for misrepresentation, it corroborates your claims about their deceptive behavior. Plus, it shifts some of the pressure off you. Instead of being the daughter who's causing problems for the family, you become the whistleblower who exposed fraud that harmed the church. I left Nathan's office with a large packet of documents to fill out, and a time frame for legal action that felt both terrifying and inspiring. For the first time since Easter Sunday, I felt in control of the situation. However, that evening came an unexpected event. Clara called when I was reheating leftover Chinese cuisine, her voice filled with barely controlled worry. "Lena, we need to talk. Can you meet me somewhere tonight?" "What's wrong?" "I can't discuss it over the phone. Can you come to Corner Cafe on 5th Street? I'll be there in 20 minutes. Her voice was urgent, unlike anything I'd heard from my generally composed older sister. Despite my better judgment, I consented to meet her. Corner Cafe was practically deserted at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. Only a few college students with laptops and an older couple eating dessert. Clara was already present when I arrived, seated in a corner booth with 2 cups of coffee going cold in front of her. She appeared weary, with her typically flawless makeup somewhat smudged and her hair pulled back in an untidy ponytail. "Thank you for coming," she murmured as I sat in the booth across from her. "You sounded upset on the phone. What's going on?" Clara looked around the cafe, as if to ensure no one was listening, before leaning forward and lowering her voice. "Eric and I had a long conversation with Mom and Dad tonight about everything that's been happening with you and the church." "Okay. Lena, there are things you don't know, things that make this situation much worse than you realize." My stomach constricted. "What things?" "Dad's been having financial problems with the hardware store for almost 2 years. The big box stores are killing his business, and he took out a loan against the store to keep it operating." "I didn't know that." "Nobody was supposed to know. But the loan payment is $1,500 a month and some months he can barely make it." I waited for her to continue, sensing that there was more. "The reason Mom has been so involved with church leadership is because Dad was hoping to get some of the church's business. They need suppliers for the building project, and if Dad could land that contract, it would save the store." The pieces were fitting together in such a way that I felt nauseous. So when Mom told the church that our family was giving $25,000 instead of $15,000, she was trying to boost Dad's chances of getting the supply contract. "It's worse than that, Lena. Dad already got the contract 3 months ago. It's worth $80,000 over the next year." I stared at her. "He got a business contract based on a lie about our family's donations. The contract was awarded after a committee vote. Dad was on the committee that approved the building budget, and Mom was chair of the fundraising subcommittee. They used the influence they gained from your donations to position themselves for the business opportunity." "That's fraud, Clara. That's actual criminal fraud." "I know." Her voice was hardly audible. "And there's more." Clara persisted despite my reservations. "The $15,000 difference between what the church expected from our family and what they actually received, Dad covered it."
Sam.
"What do you mean he covered it?" "He wrote a personal check for $10,000 to make up the shortfall so the church wouldn't know that Mom had been lying about the family's giving level." My mind was reeling. So Dad paid $10,000 to cover up Mom's lie about my donations because they needed to maintain their false reputation to keep the business contract they obtained fraudulently? Yes. And the $10,000 came from where? The failing hardware store. Clara's face wrinkled. "He borrowed it from Eric and me. He told us it was for store inventory. But after tonight's conversation, we realized what it was really for." I felt like I was slipping down a rabbit hole of deception that was just getting deeper with each discovery. My parents had not only claimed credit for my gifts, they had also used that false credit to acquire a company contract, then borrowed money from Clara to cover up their lies when I refused to donate any more. "Clara, why are you telling me this?" "Because Eric and I are financially tied to this now. If Dad's fraud gets exposed, if he loses the church contract, he can't pay us back. And if the store fails, we're out $15,000 that we were planning to use for a house down payment. So you want me to stay quiet to protect your investment?" "No." She shook her head firmly. "That's what I thought I wanted when Eric and I drove over there tonight. But after seeing how Mom and Dad talked about you, after hearing what they've been saying to other family members, I realized I can't be part of this anymore." "What have they been saying?" Clara took out her phone and read through text messages. "Mom has been telling everyone that you're having some kind of mental health crisis, that you've become paranoid and delusional about money, and that the family needs to present a united front to help you through your breakdown." She showed me screenshots of group text chats between various relatives. The narrative was continuous and terrible. According to Mom, I had become obsessed with receiving credit for my charity donations. I was making baseless charges against the family and was in serious need of professional assistance and family support. She's been positioning herself as the concerned mother trying to help her troubled daughter while simultaneously undermining everything you've said about the donation situation. And people believe her? Some do. Others are asking questions. But Lena, she's been very strategic about this. She's not denying that there was confusion about donations, she's framing it as evidence of your mental instability. The level of skill in the manipulation was amazing. Mom had discovered a method to acknowledge the facts while entirely altering their interpretation. Yes, there was some uncertainty about donations, but only because I was experiencing psychological issues that made me worried about family finances. What about the call to my boss? That was Pastor Reed, but Mom encouraged him to do it. She told him that you were showing signs of instability and that your employer should be aware that you might not be reliable. And you believe this? You thought I was having a breakdown? Clara appeared ashamed. For a while, yes. The way Mom presented it, it seemed like you were overreacting to normal family dynamics. But tonight, when I pressed them for specifics about your supposed mental health issues, everything fell apart. What do you mean? I asked Mom to explain exactly what you had said or done that indicated psychological problems. All she could point to was your insistence on getting credit for your donations and your refusal to give more money to the church. And that convinced you? That plus some things Eric noticed. He pointed out that your behavior had been completely normal at Easter dinner, until the moment Mom put you on the spot about the condo donation. He said you handled that situation with more composure than most people would have managed. I felt a wave of thankfulness for my brother-in-law, whom I'd never been especially close to but who appeared to be paying attention when it mattered. So what do you want from me now, Clara? I want to help you expose the truth. Eric and I have decided that we'd rather lose our money than be part of covering up fraud. Even if it means Dad loses the church contract, and the hardware store fails? Even then. Because if we help cover this up now, where does it end? What happens the next time Mom and Dad need money or influence? Do they use our reputations the way they used yours? Clara had reached the same conclusion I had been debating all week. It wasn't simply about money or church contributions. It was about a pattern of manipulation and control that would only worsen until stopped. What kind of help are you offering? I have records. Dad asked me to help him with some paperwork related to the church contract, so I have copies of the bid documents and the committee meeting minutes. I also have bank records showing when he borrowed money from us and when he made the donation to cover the shortfall. You'd be willing to provide those to my lawyer? Yes. And I'd be willing to testify about what Mom and Dad told us regarding their strategy for getting the contract. Clara, if this goes to court, it could destroy them. Dad could face criminal charges for fraud. And they could lose everything. I know. But Lena, they tried to destroy your career to cover up their lies. They've been systematically undermining your reputation with the entire extended family. At what point do we stop enabling their behavior? She was correct. But the thought of potentially wrecking my parents' lives felt overwhelming. Even after everything they'd done, the prospect of being accountable for their financial ruin made me sick. I need to think about this. I understand. But Lena, there's something else you should know. Mom and Dad are planning to escalate their campaign against you. What do you mean? They're going to file a police report claiming that you've been harassing them and making threats. They want to get a restraining order that would prevent you from contacting them or coming to family events. On what grounds? I haven't harassed or threatened anyone. They're going to claim that your emails to the church and your demands about donation records constitute harassment, and they're going to say that your refusal to respect their authority as parents creates a threatening environment. That's ridiculous. No court would issue a restraining order based on emails about donation records. Maybe not. But they can make you spend time and money fighting it. And in the meantime, they get to tell everyone that their daughter has become so unstable that they needed legal protection from her. The strategic reasoning that drove their approach was terrifying. They were willing to use the judicial system to manipulate the story and drive me into a defensive position. When are they planning to file this report? Tomorrow morning. I had fewer than 12 hours to decide whether I should fight back with everything I had or try to de-escalate a situation that had already gotten out of control. Clara, if I go forward with legal action against them and if you provide evidence, what happens to your relationship with Mom and Dad? It's probably over. They'll never forgive me for taking your side, especially if my testimony helps expose their fraud. And you're okay with that? She remained quiet for a long time, staring down at her coffee cup. I love Mom and Dad, Lena. But I can't love them more than I love the truth. And I can't build my future on money that was obtained through fraud and covered up through lies. What does Eric think about all this? Eric thinks our parents raised us to have integrity. And that integrity means standing up for what's right, even when it's painful. He says, if we help cover up fraud now, we become accomplices to it. I stretched across the table to squeeze Clara's hand. For the first time since Easter, I felt like I had an ally in my family who recognized the true nature of the battle. Okay, I'll call my lawyer tonight and tell him to expect new evidence, and Clara, thank you for choosing to tell me the truth. Thank you for giving me the chance to choose. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us contemplating the gravity of our recent decision. Clara then took out a manila envelope from her purse. These are copies of everything I have: bank records, contract documents, meeting minutes, text message screenshots. I made them before I called you tonight, in case I lost my nerve about helping you. I took the envelope and felt its weight, both physically and metaphorically. There's one more thing, Clara explained. Uncle Henry called me before I came here. He said he's been asking questions around the extended family, and he's discovered that several people are uncomfortable with Mom's version of events. What kind of questions? He's been asking people to think about whether your behavior at Easter really seemed like that of someone having a mental breakdown, or whether it seemed like someone standing up for themselves. And he's been pointing out that none of Mom's explanations account for why she hit you. And what are people saying? Cousin Nora said she always thought there was something off about Mom's story. Aunt Diana said she was surprised by how calmly you handled the situation at Easter, given that you'd supposedly been acting irrationally. Uncle Frank said he'd never seen you be anything other than reasonable and mature. So Mom's claims about instability didn't ring true. So the narrative is starting to crack. It's starting to crack. But Lena, that's also why Mom and Dad are escalating to legal threats. They know their story isn't holding up under scrutiny, so they're trying to shut down the conversation entirely. I left Corner Cafe with Clara's evidence and a clear idea of what I needed to accomplish. My parents had made their decision to assault my career and reputation. Now they intended to utilize the judicial system to completely silence me, but they had overlooked two critical aspects. First, I had allies they were unaware of. Second, they had committed actual crimes that could be proved by paperwork. I contacted Nathan Cole from my car and left a voicemail informing him that I had new evidence and wanted an emergency meeting first thing in the morning. Then I called Layla and begged to spend the night at her apartment. Of course. Are you okay? I'm about to destroy my parents' lives, Layla. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I'm completely certain it's the right thing to do. What changed? I found out they've been committing fraud. They tried to frame me as mentally unstable. And they're planning to file false police reports to get a restraining order against me. Jesus, Lena, how did this escalate so quickly? It didn't escalate quickly. It was always this bad. I just didn't understand the full scope of what they were doing. What happens now? Now I fight back with everything I've got. And I stopped caring about protecting people who never cared about protecting me. That night, laying on Layla's couch and staring at the ceiling, I remembered the person I'd been 2 weeks before. Someone who generously donated to her family's church, attended holiday dinners, and attempted to maintain peace despite feeling unappreciated and disregarded. That girl was gone. In her place was someone who recognized that sometimes the folks who raised you to be good are the ones who seek to exploit that kindness. Someone who understood that sometimes protecting yourself means demolishing the illusions that others rely on. Tomorrow I would give Nathan Cole enough evidence to file criminal charges against my parents. I would offer documentation that could lose Dad his business and land both of them in jail. And for the first time since Easter Sunday, I could sleep soundly knowing I was finally fighting for myself with the same zeal they were battling against me. Nathan Cole came at his office at 7 a.m., an hour ahead of his usual schedule, after getting my voicemail. I was waiting in the parking lot, clutching Clara's envelope and a thermos of coffee that I'd hardly tasted. Lena, you look like you haven't slept. I haven't. But I have everything we need to stop this before it gets worse. In his office, I spread Clara's paperwork across his conference table and explained what my sister had revealed regarding the business contract, the borrowed money, and my parents' plan to file fraudulent police reports. Nathan carefully read each paper, occasionally asking clarifying questions and taking notes. When I was done telling everything, he sat back in his chair and whistled quietly. This is significantly more serious than I initially understood. What you're describing isn't just family dysfunction or even simple fraud. This is organized conspiracy involving multiple parties and institutions. What does that mean legally? It means your parents could face federal charges, not just state-level fraud prosecution, conspiracy to defraud a religious institution, obtaining money under false pretenses. And if we can prove the call to your employer was coordinated, potentially RICO charges. The acronym sounded sinister. RICO? Racketeering laws. They apply when multiple people work together to commit crimes through an ongoing enterprise. If your parents coordinated with church officials to misrepresent donations, obtain contracts, and then retaliate against you for exposing them, that could qualify. I looked at the documents sprawled across the table. In less than 2 weeks, my family's Easter meal disagreement had escalated into probable federal criminal charges. Nathan, I need to understand something. If we pursue this fully, what happens to them? Best case scenario for your parents: they lose the church contract, face civil lawsuits for financial damages, and deal with professional reputation destruction. Worst case: prison time, asset forfeiture, and permanent criminal records. And the church? Grace Community Church will likely face its own investigation. If they awarded contracts based on false information, if they participated in retaliating against you professionally, they could lose their tax-exempt status and face civil liability. The extent of the potential repercussions was startling. I had began this effort to gain honest recognition for my donations. Now I was sitting on evidence that might devastate many institutions and land people in prison. There's something else we need to address right away, Nathan added. You mentioned they're planning to file false police reports this morning. According to Clara, yes. We need to get ahead of that. I'm going to call the Riverside Police Department and request a meeting with a detective. We'll present our evidence first, establish that your parents have motive to file false reports, and protect you from their preemptive strike. Nathan made the call while I sat, trying to process how fast everything was happening. Within an hour, we were seated across from Detective Maria Ramirez in an interview room at the police station, going over the entire timeline from Easter supper to the present. Detective Ramirez was a lady in her 40s with a calm, professional manner that suggested she'd witnessed every type of family financial wrongdoing. She made copious notes and posed probing questions regarding specific dates, amounts, and communications. Miss Mitchell, do you have any evidence that your parents explicitly intended to defraud the church when they began misrepresenting your donations? I took out my phone and showed her the text message screenshots Clara had provided. In a 6-month-old discussion between my parents, Dad wrote, "The church contract decision is next week. Make sure they know how much the Mitchell family contributes." Her answer was, "I'll talk to Pastor Reed about our family's commitment to the building fund. Between Lena's money and our reputation, we should have no problem." Detective Ramirez examined the messages. This suggests premeditation. They knew they were using your donations to enhance their reputation for business purposes. There's more, Nathan said, giving him printouts of the committee meeting minutes where Dad promised additional family donations. After evaluating everything, Detective Ramirez looked up with an expression that I couldn't read. "Miss Mitchell, I need to tell you that about an hour ago, your parents did file a report claiming you've been harassing them with demands for money and making threats about exposing private family business." My stomach sank. "Are you going to arrest me?" "Number, based on what you've shown me here, the report appears to be an attempt to discredit you before you could present evidence of their crimes. That's called anticipatory retaliation, and it actually strengthens your case." "What happens now?" "Now we open a formal investigation into fraud, conspiracy, and filing false police reports. I'll need to interview your sister, examine the church's financial records, and speak with anyone who can corroborate your account of events." Nathan and I left the police station with the weird sensation of handing over control of my family's fate to the authorities. There was no turning back now. That afternoon, when Detective Ramirez began her investigation, I received an unexpected call. "Lena, this is Pastor William Reed. I think we need to talk." "Pastor Reed, my lawyer has advised me not to discuss the situation directly with anyone from the church. I understand your position. But there are developments you should be aware of. Can you meet with me and our board president this evening? I promise this isn't an ambush or an attempt to pressure you." Something about his tone indicated real concern rather than manipulation. Against Nathan's advice, I agreed to meet at Keys Church at 6 p.m., with the understanding that I would leave immediately if the talk turned heated. Grace Community Church appeared less imposing in the early evening light, more like the community institution it was intended to be rather than the power center it had become under my parents' control. Pastor Reed was waiting in his office with Margaret Dawson, the board president, and a retired bank executive whom I had met at numerous church occasions over the years. Both appeared uneasy, as if they had been having painful chats. "Lena, thank you for coming. Please, sit down." I remained standing. "Pastor Reed, I want to be clear that I'm here to listen, not to negotiate about donations or family reconciliation." "I understand, Lena. This afternoon we received a visit from a police detective asking questions about your family's donation history and your father's contract with the church." "Okay." Margaret Dawson spoke up. "We've spent the last several hours reviewing financial records, committee meeting minutes, and correspondence related to your family's involvement with the church." And Pastor Reed appeared to be in genuine pain. "We've discovered significant discrepancies between what we believed about your family's giving and what the records actually show." "What kind of discrepancies?" For the past 3 years, we've been operating under the understanding that your parents were contributing approximately $20,000 annually, with additional family contributions bringing the total to $25,000, or $30,000. But the actual records show your parents have given exactly $10,000 each year. Your contributions have been $15,000 annually. We somehow lost track of the fact that you were making separate donations. Margaret Dawson took out a folder. More concerning is what we've discovered about the contract award process. Your father was involved in budget discussions where he had access to information about expected donation levels, and he used that information to make promises about family giving. Are you saying he had inside information when he bid for the supply contract? We're saying there was a clear conflict of interest that wasn't properly disclosed. Committee members aren't supposed to bid for contracts related to projects they help oversee. Pastor Reed leaned forwards. Lena, we owe you an enormous apology. We allowed your individual contributions to be absorbed into your family's reputation, and we failed to recognize the ethical problems with your father's dual role as committee member and contractor. What does that mean practically? Margaret Dawson replied. It means we're canceling your father's contract and launching a full review of our governance policies. It also means we're implementing new procedures to ensure individual donors are acknowledged separately from family accounts. And the building fund shortfall that I was supposed to cover? There is no shortfall, Pastor Reed stated. We've discovered that your father made a $10,000 donation in March specifically to cover the gap between what we expected from your family and what we actually received. When we account for that correctly, the building fund is exactly where it should be. I felt both vindicated and saddened. The church was finally accepting the truth, but only after a police inquiry. Pastor Reed, there's something I need you to understand. The call you made to my employer wasn't just inappropriate, it was defamatory and potentially criminal. He grimaced. I realize that now. Your mother convinced me that you were struggling with personal issues that might affect your professional judgment. I see now that she was manipulating me to pressure you into compliance. What are you going to do about that? I've already called Dr. Kaplan at Riverside Family Services to apologize and clarify that the church has no concerns about your professional capabilities. I've also submitted a formal statement to the police explaining my role in that incident. Margaret Dawson added, the board is also prepared to provide a written statement supporting your professional reputation, should you need it for any future employment situations. I appreciated their efforts to make amends, but the harm to my relationship with the church seemed irreversible. I think I'll be finding a new place to worship. I understand, Pastor Reed replied calmly. But Lena, I hope you'll consider that Grace Community Church made mistakes in governance and oversight, not in fundamental values. We want to do better, and we've learned important lessons from this situation. The lessons you've learned came at the cost of my family relationships and my sense of safety in this community. I'm glad you're implementing better policies, but I can't pretend this didn't happen. Of course. But please know that you'll always be welcome here if you choose to return. I left the church feeling emotionally exhausted, but legally vindicated. Pastor Reed's admissions would bolster the case against my parents and show that even the church acknowledged they had been duped. The next morning, news arrived that changed everything again. Detective Ramirez called to tell me my parents had been arrested. Both Thomas and Janet Mitchell were taken into custody this morning on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false police reports, and interference with employment. Your father faces additional charges related to the conflict of interest in the contract process. What happens now? They'll be arraigned later today. Based on the evidence, I expect significant bail amounts and conditions that prevent them from contacting you or your employer. Will there be a trial? That depends on whether they accept plea agreements. The prosecutor is prepared to offer reduced sentences in exchange for full restitution to the church and formal apologies to you and your employer. And if they don't accept plea deals? Then we go to trial and they face maximum penalties for all charges. I spent the remainder of the day receiving calls from extended family members, most of whom were surprised by the arrests and perplexed about what had transpired. Uncle Henry had been working to refute Mom's story about my mental health, but the criminal charges forced everyone to consider the possibility that I had been speaking the truth all along. Clara called that evening, in tears. Lena, I'm so sorry. I knew they were lying and manipulating, but I never imagined it would lead to arrests. You did the right thing by giving me the evidence, Clara. None of this would have been exposed without your help. But they're our parents. Seeing them in handcuffs on the local news, it's devastating. It is devastating. But they chose to commit crimes rather than admit they were wrong. That's not our fault. What happens to the hardware store now? I don't know. That's up to the courts and their creditors. 3 weeks later, my parents agreed to plea deals. Dad pleaded guilty to fraud and conflict of interest charges, and was sentenced to 2 years probation and $50,000 in reparation to Grace Community Church. Mom pleaded guilty to filing false reports and slander, and she was sentenced to 1 year probation and required to formally apologize to me and Dr. Kaplan. The hardware business is closed forever. The building was sold to cover court costs and reparations. My parents relocated to a modest apartment across town, and, according to Clara, Dad found work as a part-time employee at a competitive hardware business. I never interacted with them again, though Clara sent occasional updates. Mom had told relatives that I had destroyed the family for money, neatly ignoring her involvement in the deceit and manipulation. Dad was devastated by the loss of his business and reputation, spending the most of his time watching television and avoiding interaction with former clients and church members. The extended family separated into camps. Uncle Henry, Clara, Eric and a few cousins kept contact with me and admitted that I had been harmed. Others supported my parents or just withdrew from the matter, refusing to take sides in a disagreement that had harmed the family's public image. Layla assisted me in finding a new church where I could worship away from the daily reminders of family conflict. I continued to work at Riverside Family Services, where Dr. Kaplan's encouragement had shielded my career from my parents' sabotage efforts. My annual philanthropic giving rose in part because I was no longer concerned about how my offerings would be perceived. 6 months after being arrested, I received an unexpected letter. Grace Community Church informed me that they had developed new governance policies in response to the problems in my situation. They had established a clear distinction between financial contributors and contract vendors, implemented individual donor recognition systems, and trained staff to recognize indicators of financial abuse in families. The letter included an offer to return to the congregation, as well as a formal acknowledgement that my contributions had been unfairly ascribed to others. Pastor Reed included a personal remark at the bottom. "Your courage in standing up for truth has made our church stronger and more ethical. We hope you'll consider that a positive legacy from a painful experience." I retained the letter but did not return it to Grace Community Church. Some wounds provide insight but never completely heal. Clara and Eric finally gave birth to a daughter named Emma. I took on the role of Aunt Lena, which brought me unexpected joy and reminded me that family can be chosen and made, rather than suffered out of duty. On Emma's first Christmas, Clara asked, "Do you miss Mom and Dad?" "I miss the parents I thought I had," I said to her. "But I don't miss the people they actually were." "Do you think they'll ever understand what they did wrong?" "I think they understand they got caught. Whether they understand the deeper problems with their behavior, I doubt it." "Any regrets about how you handled things?" I thought about the question thoroughly. "I regret that it had to escalate so far. I regret that they chose lies and manipulation over honesty. But I don't regret standing up for myself or exposing the truth." "Even though it destroyed the family?" "Clara, they destroyed the family when they decided to treat me like a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected. I just made their choices visible." That evening, I sat in my downtown flat, which I had redecorated after getting a minor settlement in the defamation case against the church. The place felt peaceful in a way it hadn't before, when I was preoccupied with family turmoil and church politics. I reflected on the girl who had walked into that Easter meal 2 weeks before her life imploded. She'd been foolish in some ways, believing that family meant protection and love meant honesty. However, she had also been courageous enough to raise questions when something felt wrong and powerful enough to defend herself when attacked. The trip from Easter supper to this peaceful Christmas evening had cost me a family, a church, and several months of emotional pain. But it had taught me something more valuable. That I could withstand treachery, fight for the truth, and establish a life based on my own principles rather than other people's expectations. Sometimes those who raise you to be good want you to be simple to govern. Standing up for yourself can sometimes entail breaking the illusions on which others rely. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to give in to their worst inclinations, even if they label it betrayal. I never received the apologies I had hoped for from my parents. But I got something better. The knowledge that I had operated with integrity during a difficult scenario. That insight was more valuable than any connection based on falsehoods and deception. My phone buzzed with a text from Layla. "Dinner tomorrow? I'm creating the spaghetti dish you enjoy." I smiled as I typed back, "Yes. Thank you for being my actual family." Some stories may not conclude with reconciliation or forgiveness. Some stories conclude with clarity, boundaries, and the calm satisfaction of knowing you chose the truth over comfort. It was one of those stories. I was finally at peace with it. Up next, thank you for watching. Take care. Good luck. After hearing today's story, Perhaps it has prompted you to consider new questions or recalled old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments spark new tales, which connect us all. Everyone's life journey is unique, and we all try to interpret the world in our own manner. These moments serve as a reminder that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning new things. If you love this article, please share it with your friends. Your views and feedback are always valuable to us because they inspire us to create even better material. Every tale has a distinct perspective, and our goal is to comprehend everyone's point of view in order to create diverse and relatable material. Stories like these remind us that everyone's journey through life is unique, and hearing other people's stories teaches us new things. You can also share your own experiences with us. We value your experiences as well. If you enjoyed this video, please provide feedback. We strive to generate content that always brightens your mind and inspires you with fresh thoughts. If you've seen this video before, your feedback is still valuable. Every piece of input helps us enhance our material and provide our readers with a different viewpoint. Today, what we witnessed was only a fraction of the numerous stories shared on Reddit and around the world. It's a reminder that we all try to comprehend life by sharing our experiences with one another. This movie was just one example of how we try to connect with others via storytelling and learning about different aspects of life. We aim to continue sharing stories that will help us all learn and grow together.